Shalom, welcome to our Erev Shabbat talk on Shabbat and Parshat Chayei Sara from the Zohar Kadosh of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We have a very interesting, a beautiful insight into the language of the Torah and how that teaches us so many different things. The Zohar tells us when Sarah died, it's the only place in the Torah where a woman's death is recorded in terms of her life. We see that when Chava passed away, we weren't even told about that. When Rivka passed away, we weren't told about that. We were told about Devorah passing away. It says Tamat Devorah, and it says Tamat Rachel, right? B'derech le Beit Lechem. And we're told about the death of Batshua, the wife of Yehuda. But nowhere are we told about the life, like we're told about the life of Sarah. Why? What is the distinction that's being made by the Zohar? Well, it tells us, and I'm going to make it as brief as possible, it's getting late, the sun's going down very fast this time of year, that Sarah never tasted the taste of death. We know that the taste of death, what is death itself, is the absence of life. That in truth, the entire universe is a living entity because God is a living, eternal entity. He created a space where there would be the absence of life. And so we define the absence of life simply as death. So when we talk about the taste of death, we're talking simply about what it feels like, the absence of life. And so when we're told that Rachel and all these other great tzaddikus of Am Yisrael died, it's speaking about that they did have a taste of what we call death, that absence of the presence of life, whereas Sarah, she didn't. She didn't. And her entire life was complete. We're told her youth, her adulthood, her old age were all complete life. And she never had that interaction, that taste of death, which of course the Torah defines for us as anything against life, so that, well, we call that sin, we call that averah, we call that disconnection from the life of life, from the creator of the universe. So if we look at it, we might ask ourselves, why did Sarah merit to this tremendous level? Well, we're told that she had divine inspiration greater than her husband, the prophet Abraham. Now, how could that be? If you look at it, the Bible is full of the stories of Abraham, all the wonderful things he did. And we're told that God spoke to him in several places and told him what was going to be and what he should do and promised him. And it doesn't tell us about those types of prophecies that Sarah had. It doesn't tell us that God talked to Sarah at all. And yet the rabbi said she had more divine inspiration than her husband. So I think if we look at it, we have to understand and change a little bit our definition of divine inspiration. That the divine presence always rested on Sarah's tent, we're told, and until she passed away, and then the divine presence moved off of her tent. I believe what it means is that she had the divine presence in her everyday life, in all the decisions that she made to build her family, to build the beginnings of the Jewish people, the decisions that need to be made to create life around you. And they certainly had hundreds of people traveling with them wherever they went. Remember, when you're a patriarch and you travel with thousands of head of livestock, there's a lot of people with you. It's like a moving village wherever they go. And so Sarah was in charge of all of that. And Sarah was a woman who had the foresight, the divine inspiration to see the right thing to do at the right time in the right place. So that's a level of divine inspiration. We don't call it prophecy because it wasn't a direct moment that changed the course of the formation of this nation, the Jewish people, but rather she was interacting on a daily basis with all the details of life. Whereas when God spoke to Abraham, he was giving him very specific moves to make towards the achievement of what he needed to do. And so Sarah's greatness, her divine inspiration, was really in the everyday things. And so I think that's a very important lesson for all of us, that I don't have to aspire to be a prophet of the Bible. That's a little bit tall order, right? But rather, I need to have divine inspiration in the little moves that I need to make through the course of every day and the course of our weeks and our months and our years. And so the Torah tells us that it was a life of Sarah, that Sarah was always alive, that the taste of death, the absence of the divine presence, it never got near her. And she was always attached to that upper level. And so the Torah goes out of its way to measure her youth, her middle age, and her old age, and to tell us that it was all one complete life. And a complete life, of course, well, we can compare that to Shabbat, because Shabbat itself is the day of all life. On Shabbat, we don't kill. We don't kill animals to eat. We don't even uproot plants or vegetables to eat. We don't even pick fruit off trees, because that's disconnecting that fruit from the source of its life. So on Shabbat, we want to connect everything we can to life. And during the week, we're allowed to take things from life and, so to speak, kill them in order that we sustain the rest of humanity. But on Shabbat is the time of all life. And so Sarah herself was this idea of all life. She never tasted what Chava tasted when she met the primordial snake in the garden, which is an idea. Ultimately, human beings are alive. We're attached to life as long as we can sit here and talk about it. But when we go outside the tree of life, when we enter the realm of the duality, when we enter the realm of good and evil, all of a sudden things lose their taste. And what's that like? What does that mean? You ever seen a child that doesn't even know what to die means? Or you look at a child that doesn't know what to lose somebody means? They're innocent of death. The concept of death has never entered their mind. And think about that for a minute. They are attached to life because the idea of death doesn't exist in their psyche, in their mindset. And only when a person gets exposed to death do we suddenly realize there is an end to our stay on this planet. But ultimately, life is not a transitory period. Rather, death itself is really the only transition. That when we live in our bodies here, we're alive. And when we leave this place and go somewhere else, we're alive. And there's only a transition that takes place between the two. And that transition, the rabbis call it Bein HaShmashot, in relation to the weekday and Shabbat. There is a period of time right before Shabbat and right after the end of the 6 work days of the week. It's called Bein HaShmashot. It means literally between the times. There's that transition period from the weekdays to Shabbat. So too, there's a transition period between life in this world and life in the next world. And that transition can be difficult. Anybody who tries to get ready for Shabbat and they're under pressure to do all the things that need to be done feels pressure, right? And certainly, before a person leaves this world, he feels a little strain, a little stress. I was just in the market here and an old friend said, I'm going to die. I said, stop talking that way. What are you talking about? He's in his 80s, right? And he's in his 80s and he says, Avram, I just feel it. I feel, and it's a scary thought. And then afterwards I thought, well, he's in his 80s. He's had a good life. Why do I feel down about it? And that's also part of the taste of death, not accepting the transition and the need for the transition and being afraid of the transition. And so Sarah Imenu had a complete life. She never tasted that idea of death. And we're told by the Midrash that she really died when she got the news that Yitzhak, her son, was going to be brought on the altar at Har Moriah for the Akedah. And before that, she was totally alive. She heard her son was going to be sacrificed to God, and then she died. So really the sacrifice, of course, was Sarah herself. And she gave her life for the Jewish people and for her family, and she never tasted that absence of the presence of God. We should all be blessed with such a thing. We should all be blessed to know that we are really alive. And then when we feel death, we feel the shadow, we feel the fear, we feel the unknown, we feel the uncertainty. Those things are actually illusions of the absence of life. And if we really feel life, the way life is really lived, those ideas are just like they're empty concepts. They come and they go. And we don't have to live them at all if we're really attached to Hashem and to the life of all life. So we should all be blessed with that, and to work towards that, and to know that every week we get a little bit of it right now as the sun is going down. And I have to say goodbye, and Shabbat Shalom to all of you. And we'll see you next week on Patreon and YouTube and Facebook and all the platforms. God bless you all.